Oh, afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. So we've got a little storm. So Labour are removing the protection from unfair dismissal from day one in the Employment Rights Bill. Now, there's a few things to go over this. Labour deny it's a breach of the manifesto. It's very clearly a breach of the manifesto, I will say. However, I'll go on to that in a minute because manifestos can be tricksy, so we have to go over the reasoning. It also has to be said that although this sounds like capitulation to businesses, and indeed it has come from very heavy lobbying by business groups, the Trades Union Congress seem quite happy with it. Broadly speaking, that's not universally. There are some unions, we can probably guess which one, who are not happy with this, but by and large unions are. So you'd think to yourself, so why would that be? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, most unions just want this bill passed now. We know that the House of Lords is holding it up. In fact, what's happening today, this announcement today, wouldn't be happening at all if the Lords had just passed it like they probably should have done, really. So it's being held up in the Lords by some Lib Dems and Tories. So most unions just want it passed because there's a lot of really good stuff in there and they want it. If they can't get it through the Lords, Labour can ram it through the Lords using the Parliament Act, but they'd have to wait for the next session of Parliament, which would come too late. The intention is that these rights start being implemented from next April. That can't happen if you have to wait for another session of Parliament. So there is a sense in which some unions just say, we want it done, get it done. However, we're not going to quibble over one thing. But then there is another positive as well in that, as well as why have Labour capitulated? Well, here's the thing. They have and they haven't. The reason why, according to a report in The Guardian, quite a lot of unions are actually happy with this change is although they would prefer for their members to have this day one protection from unfair dismissal, it also tidies up the law on probationary periods, which they said was very messy. So it's a bit like it's taken away and giving back as well. So although workers will not get day one right, they will get day one rights, but they won't get day one rights from unfair dismissal specifically. They'll still get the others, but they will have a much clearer law on the probationary period, which will now be 6 months down from 9 months. So basically what was happening before, the probationary period was going to be 9 months in the bill, but it was believed, well, unions said anyway, that they thought it was very messy, whereas now it's going to be a much clearer 6 months. So basically the TUC are happy, is what I'm saying. But again, it is still a breach of the manifesto. Like, if people are happy with it, then that's fine. But at the same time, if anyone wants to claim that Labour have broken the manifesto, they can now do it. Now, I will explain about this because I'm going to use two examples to show the tricksiness of manifestos. So, for example, it's quite funny because yesterday, the news came out yesterday, didn't it? Yesterday, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and everyone were going out saying, no, we haven't broken the manifesto on the budget, which they can certainly argue they haven't. And then ironically, they did break it on the work. And if you're going to break a manifesto promise as a Labour government, why do it on workers' rights? But anyway, people are saying that Labour broke their manifesto promise on taxes because they promised not to raise taxes on ordinary workers. Now, here's where the tricksiness of a manifesto comes. This is the relevant paragraph from the manifesto. The Conservatives have raised the tax burden to a 70-year high. We will ensure taxes on working people are kept as low as possible. Labour will not increase taxes on working people, which is why we will not increase national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. So what some people are doing is they're taking this little half of a sentence, Labour will not increase taxes on working people, and saying we don't need to look at the rest of it, don't need to look at the rest of it. That's the thing, you've broken it. Because of the fiscal drag, right? The fiscal drag. But you can't just take a bit of a sentence out of context. You have to read everything around it. And just before that line, it does say, we will ensure taxes on working people are kept as low as possible. So that's not saying they're not going to be raised. And then the bit after it, where they do say they're not going to increase taxes, they then specify what they mean by that. So they mean, We won't increase national insurance. They haven't increased employees' national insurance. We will not increase the basic, higher, or additional rates of income tax. They haven't. We will not increase VAT. They haven't. So Labour will argue, you can't just take out a little snippet out of context. The whole thing in context, we've stuck to it, which they can argue. Whereas the workers' rights one, it's the big bit, but I'll read out the relevant bit, which is about 2/3 of the way down the left-hand column, if you are looking for it. So it says, introducing basic rights from day one to parental leave, sick pay, which are both still in, and protection from unfair dismissal, which has been removed. So there's no ambiguity there. There's nothing before or after it which gives them a get-out clause. That's the line. Introducing basic rights from day one to parental leave, sick pay, and protection from unfair dismissal. It's clear. Sorry, that is a manifesto breach. Now, it can still be a better policy. They could still have improved it. It could still be made better for workers. Matthew there said towards the beginning, the changes make sense. Having protections from dismissal from day one was insane. Well, that's a matter of opinion. Would be exploited by employees. Could be. 6 months is still an improvement on the current 2 years. Yes, it is. But from a strategic point of view, from a political point of view, if Labour had from the start said, right back to the last election, if they'd have said, we're going to introduce, let's put it back up, hold on. Introducing basic rights from day one to parental leave and sick pay and protection from unfair dismissal from 6 months as part of a more robust probation period, people would still have been happy with that. And that's what they would have delivered. So from a political sense, what they're delivering now may be better. As I say, multiple unions are saying, actually, on balance, this is better. So unions are broadly on, as I say, the TU, excuse me. In fact, I'll read out from this Guardian article. A TUC source said there was a view that the 6-month threshold was more workable than the more loosely defined 9-month probation period, which will be scrapped. So the TUC are broadly happy with it. Not all. It does say here, a trade union source told The Guardian, this will be from Unite, they've capitulated and there may be more to come, right? Well, hopefully there won't be, but you can say capitulation to the Lords isn't a good look. Well, no, I mean, this is the thing. So, Wangapagan there is just saying capitulation to the Lords isn't a good look, though, especially on top of the bad moves optics they've already made. So from a political point of view, this is what I would have done if I was Labour. So let's say you believe that this is actually a better policy and the TUC broadly, not exclusively, not universally, but broadly agree, right? Here's what I would do if I was in Labour's position. This is how I would present it to the public. I would say the Lords are blocking a piece of legislation that has a strong public mandate. This is why we need to democratise the House of Lords, right? I'd stick the boot in, and then I would say, but we want this legislation in place so that we can start implementing it from next April. So we're going to make this amendment now, get it passed, but then we're going to review it within 2 years. So that then means that Labour will be basically saying, the Lords are preventing us from implementing this, even though we've got a public mandate. So their hands are clean. This is on Tory and Lib Dem peers in the unelected Tory and Lib Dem peers in the House of Lords, right? So you pin the blame on them. But also, although you're accepting the amendment for now, you say you're going to review it in 2 years' time. If in 2 years' time it seems to be working well, you can say, well, you can just sort of quietly forget about it, right? That's how I would play this politically. But by Labour taking ownership of this change, they are taking ownership of a breach of the manifesto. And it's like, even if they believe it's a better policy, and it might be, even if they believe this is better, why not blame the Lords for it anyway? Why not? Like, They're there to be blamed. Because put it this way, if the Lords had passed this legislation, remember, I'll remind people what's happened here. So the legislation passed the Commons. It went to the House of Lords. The House of Lords added a load of amendments to it just before summer. After summer, those amendments were heard by the House of Commons. They rejected them all. Labour whipped to vote them all down, every single one. Then it goes back to the Lords. The Lords are still quibbling, right? Now, what should happen, the Salisbury Convention says the legislation, right? So this is what's supposed to happen. This is called the Salisbury Convention. If a piece of legislation is deemed to have a public mandate, usually by being explicitly in the manifesto of the winning party, right? The government. So it doesn't mean for everything, but it means anything that's got a clear public mandate, either from a referendum, but more usually because it was a manifesto promise. So the legislation clears the House of Commons and it goes to the House of Lords. The unelected Lords are supposed to look at it and go, okay, we think certain things are unworkable. Here are some suggestions for amendments, and that's fine, no problem. The amendments go to the House of Commons. If the House of Commons votes any or all of those amendments down, the legislation has to go back to the Lords. The Salisbury Convention dictates that in that situation, the Lords is just supposed to pass it. It's just supposed to, okay, we tried to suggest improvements. You didn't like them. Fine. On your head be it, my son. That is the Salisbury Convention. And the Lords have no right to block this legislation. So Labour should be making a big deal of that, even if they think it's a better policy as it is now. Politically, why take the rap for it? You don't need to. You don't need to. If the Lords had have actually honoured the Salisbury Convention, it would now be in law. The King would have already signed it by now. Because it's already gone back to the Lords. They'd have just gone, sure, whatever. And the King would have signed it. It would now be the Employment Rights Act 2025. Simple as that. Disappointing, outrageous how the Lords can keep voting against a clear manifesto pledge. Yes, this is why what I would do, if I was in charge of reforming the Lords, I would have it as an elected chamber. And then I know some people think to themselves, but if it's elected, then they can say that they've got a mandate to block legislation. No, you change the rules, right? So what you do is you put the Salisbury Convention into law. So it's no longer a convention, a gentleman's agreement, right? It becomes a constitutional imperative. So you actually formalise constitutionally that the process will be that, because remember, the whole point of democratising the laws is first of all to make sure that they represent the whole country, not just a load of people living in. In fact, there are more people in the House of Lords who live in France than live in like Yorkshire, I think. They mostly live in London, in or around London. But anyway, so that's one purpose. But what you could do in terms of making sure you didn't have this house blocking type situation, you just say that when legislation passes from the House of Commons to whatever the new chamber is, I keep saying I'd call it the House of Regents, right? To the House of Regents. The House of Regents will go through its normal process and they will suggest amendments. Those amendments will go to the House of Commons. Any amendments that the House of Commons reject. So what will happen is the House of Commons will just vote on those amendments. Then the legislation with any amendments that pass will go back to the House of Regents, at which point the House of Regents has to pass it. Or maybe not even that. No, actually, what am I talking about? Don't get rid of that. Don't even do that. So what happens is, goes to the House of Regents, they do their thing, they put amendments in, goes back to the House of Commons, the House of Commons votes on the amendments, in whatever shape the legislation is after those amendments have been voted on, goes straight to the King. Doesn't go back to the House of Regents. Cut out the middleman. Don't need it. So they get one chance to suggest amendments. They get one go at it, one crack. It doesn't go back to them at that point. They're just there literally as a revising chamber. And you can just set that into constitutional law. It never goes back to them. They get one go at amendments. The House of Commons will vote. They might vote in favour of some of them. Might go, oh yeah, that's fair enough. That's fine. And reject others. And then whatever amendments go through, go straight to the King. Done. That's how I would deal with this. If I was the government right now, that's how I would put all the blame on Tory and Lib. Well, I'd emphasise on the Tories. just politically, but it's Lib Dems as well. I'd put it on the unelected Lords. I'd proper make a big deal of that. Unelected Lords are blocking a manifesto promise. But that is the constitutional situation. This is what, and it is in the manifesto, democratising the House of Lords. This is why we need House of Lords reform. Raise the temperature on that a bit. There you go. The manifesto does say they will consult with businesses on how best to implement this. Could they argue this is a result of the consultation? They can if they like, but I'm still going to say that that doesn't really wash with me for this bit. Because that is still a clear manifesto promise. It doesn't say subject to businesses approving it. And the other thing I'm going to say is this, right? Some long-time viewers may remember me talking about this a year and a half ago now. So what happened was, when was it now? It was early on in 2024. And we were getting ready for the election. And it was reported that Keir Starmer had ordered his shadow cabinet at the time to what was called bomb-proof the manifesto. So it said to all of these people, these shadow secretaries of state, I want you to go through a rigorous process to make sure every single promise is deliverable, that we can do every single one. Now, the way I reported on that at the time was because there's no such thing as a manifesto that gets fully implemented. So I thought the strategy was because Labour were very likely to win the election without having to make grand promises, right? Where Streeting described it as under-promising and over-delivering. I don't think the public think they've done that, by the way, but we will see. But nonetheless, that was the strategy, and it was a sound strategy. It really was. Labour were in a position where they could win without the big grand promises, and did win. So I thought the strategy was offer a fairly tame manifesto that's not hugely ambitious, but one that you can deliver every single line of, so that at the next election, when it'll be tougher, you get to say, I kept every single promise. You show me anything in the manifesto we didn't do. I thought that was the strategy. Now, all I'm going to say here is what went wrong. If they were ordered to bomb-proof the manifesto, to deliberately not hype stuff, to make it so that it was all 100% deliverable, what the bloody hell happened here? That suggests they didn't do their homework properly. And there have been accusations of that. The Institute for Government have actually said that Labour did not seem sufficiently prepared for government. This is evidence of it, isn't it? If this is a better way of doing it, they should have... Why didn't they have it... It's not like... This isn't like 2017, where Labour had just changed its leader in 2015, Jeremy Corbyn, and then basically a year and a half later, he was having to fight an election. That's not really enough time to get a manifesto fully worked out. So you can understand recycling a few things. But Starmer had over 4 years. I know the pandemic derailed some things, but he had over 4 years to get it ship shape, right? Really should have been better. Anyway. Highlight and attach the reason why that specific bit of legislation has been blocked, obstacle the logic. I do not understand why Labour are not, given that Starmer himself wants the House of Lords to be basically abolished and replaced by a different chamber. I really don't know why. It's like they're just missing opportunities here. They're just politically... They're taking the rap for a clear breach of the manifesto. They're going on the defensive over it, and they don't need to. Like I said, even if they think it's a good policy and they intend to stick with it, just say, the reason this is happening is because the Lords are refusing to pass legislation with a strong public mandate. But we want it passing so that workers can be benefiting from these rights from next April. So we're going to pass it like it is, but we're going to review it in a couple of years' time. So that's still before the election. We'll review it in 2 years' time. And then if in 2 years' time everyone's delighted with the new workers' rights, they can just quietly drop it. If someone asks them, they could say, oh, yeah. They could say, yeah, we've started the review now. The review might take another couple of years, sorry. You know, just to that. Regarding the immigration figures, is the billionaire press even reporting on it? Not that I saw in the front pages of the newspapers at any rate. Let me have a look. Let's just go have a quick look at the Telegraph, because that's the most, of all the Tory client media, that's the one that the public are most approve of. Let's have a look here. Yeah, they're really annoying. They don't actually have a politics. Oh, they do. Politics. Yeah, they're quite happy to. Starmer faces growing workers' rights backlash led by Rayner ally. Not Rayner herself, they note. Not really seeing it much. So if they reported on it yesterday, it was probably quite brief, shall we say. Yeah, not seeing anything. So they don't seem all that arsed about it. Politics. Let's have a look. Politics. No, I mean, and this, as I said, the Daily Telegraph are Tory client media. Like literally everything in it is like attack Labour for literally everything, even stuff they haven't done, which is exactly the definition of Tory client media, as opposed to ones who are just naturally right wing but otherwise honest within themselves. I can't see anything. They're not really. But there'll be something somewhere buried in there. But it is what it is. Maybe they ordered the bomb-proof material through the Tory VIP lane. Maybe they did. But it's remarkable. It's remarkable that a year and a half ago, Starmer ordered his senior front bench to basically chuck out anything they couldn't be absolutely guaranteed to deliver. And what happened? McSweeney is so harmful to this government, Starmer keep him just proves he has to go. This may not even be McSweeney. This latest thing on the workers' right may not even be him. But he is harmful. He is an absolute liability in his current role. Media reform would fix so many issues. We do need media reform. There are certain issues it won't. I don't see how it would. Like, if you're going to have a privately owned media company, you can't tell people what they've got to report on. You can force them. There's certain things you can do with media reform. You can break it up so that it's not all owned by the same 3 billionaires. You could do that. Or in terms of the press anyway. 4 billionaires if you count like broadcast media. You could break that up. You could stop. Like, for example, the Telegraph is being sold to the same group who owns... Is it the Mail? I think it's the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. So it's like... The Telegraph's been sold, but it's been sold to the same conglomerate that owns all the rest of the press, right? So you've got this same small group of politically aligned media barons all owning our press. In fact, I've got a video out at 1 o'clock where I'm talking about various issues of oligarchy and citing a report that says, as of 2022, 90% of the press was owned by these 3 conglomerates. Right? So that's something you can do. Break it up. Stop multiple titles being owned by the same people, because that shouldn't happen, right? The second thing you could do is say that you, like, we sort of have a rule now about foreign ownership, but it's not very good. So I would have it so that no media outlet, licensed media outlet in this country, can be owned by groups that are not registered in the UK for tax purposes. So that would even stop the Daily Mail, because even though they can claim to be a British company, they're registered offshore for tax purposes. So I'd stop that. So there are things you could do. What you can't do, though, is tell them what to report on. There's no way of doing that, because that's government control then, isn't it? So if a private newspaper didn't want to report on migration figures, there's no way of forcing them to. Why aren't the Competitions and Markets Authority blocking it? Well, exactly, because the press media are deemed to be different. They have special rules. but it should. It shouldn't be possible for people to read two different newspapers thinking that they're two different newspapers when they're actually owned by the same people. They'll have different editors. They will have different editors, but the editors are everyone is hired ultimately by the people who own it. The people who own it give it so although the people who own these newspapers they're not breathing over the shoulders of those editors. So the editors do what they think they should do, but they're the ones hiring them. If I owned a newspaper, if I wanted that newspaper to promote far right ideas, I would promote a far right editor. If I wanted it to promote hard left ideas, I'd appoint a hard left editor. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you don't have to have day-to-day management of your newspaper for it to determine its bias. You just hire the editors who are already aligned with that thinking and tell them to go nuts on their bias. David, they say, I don't like the change, but it's not worth delaying all the other good measures in the bill. I know some don't like the word, but pragmatism is needed sometimes. But as I say, they don't even have to be pragmatic about it. They could be political about it. Like I said, so easy just to say, Tories in the House of the unelected Tories in the House of Lords are blocking workers' rights, which has got a public mandate. And by the way, Nigel Farage voted against it as well. There's nothing we can do about that, but this is another reason why we need to reform the House of Lords. So we're just going to pass it as it is so that workers can benefit from the dozens of new workers' rights contained within the bill from next April. But we're going to review this in a couple of years. Say that. And then what you do in a couple of years, like I said, that way, if someone says you're breaking the manifesto, you say, no, we're not. The House of Lords have. We're going to review it in a couple of years. Then in a couple of years, obviously, journalists are going to come back to you. Let's say you don't want to you don't want to change it. So then they say, oh, you said you'd review it. Yeah, we're gonna have a review now, is what you will say. When will it be completed? Well, we'll do it properly. So basically not till after the election. But it's still in the clear because it's not your fault, right? The Lords are the ones who voted against it. MZ, they confirming, yes, Daily Mail's taking over the Daily Telegraph. Yeah, it's mad. Because people think they're different papers. And they've got different editors, but they're hired by the same people. Oil and gas lobbyists are pissed off at Miliband for seeing them, but ignoring what they want. Funny as hell. Yeah, there was a bit of a... So, in terms of the Miliband thing, there is a bit of a funny thing over the North Sea gas stuff. It's really weird. So, Labour could be breaking manifesto promises on that as well. They are being tricksy on that, but that you could argue that's a... So, what Ed Miliband's department, he's obviously been ordered by number 10, but either way, it doesn't matter. The government... What they're doing, they promise no new oil and gas licenses for the North Sea. Now, it seems they may be assigning some new ones, but they've said only if they're within a certain range of existing ones. So they're classing that as not really new because it's within the same sort of fields, right? Even though it's a bit dodgy, it's highly dodgy, I would suggest. However, the interesting thing is this. Environmentalists don't care about that. So even though these sort of supplementary licenses could arguably be a breach of the manifesto, they don't give a shit because that's not going to generate much. There's not much in there, right? So if you did assign it, they actually don't care if Miliband authorises any of those licenses because there's not really much oil or gas down there. Ironically, what they do want him to block is the Rosefield site. But allowing that isn't a breach of the manifesto because that licence was already granted by Rishi Sunak before. So it's not a new licence. So it's really weird. It's really weird. The environmental, and again, for practical reasons, they are being, I'm not criticising them because they're actually being pragmatic, right? But for practical reasons, they don't care if Labour break the manifesto and assign some of these, like, I don't know really what you'd call them, like satellite licenses. Whereas they do want them to break the manifesto effectively or go against it by cancelling an existing licence for the Rosefield site. Because that's huge. That's something like 500,000 barrels of oil down there. Or more than that even. I wish Labour had you advised them. I wish they just had someone who knows what they're doing. Because it wouldn't even need to be me. There's people who would be able to do it better. They're just not listening to them. Is there a way of stopping corporations forcibly buying out smaller entities? Not without the government doing something, no. Ed's the star player of this government. I think there are a few good ones, but Ed Miliband, I mean, bear in mind, Ed Miliband, he's a rare beast. You don't get this very often in politics. He is in charge of a department that is basically his thing. It's his big thing, right? So energy and climate action are what Ed Miliband has had as his specialist subject for about 2 decades now. So he is uniquely placed to be very good at it. He's very motivated. And as I say, in politics, you generally don't get, you get positions in politics according to it's like a ladder, a career ladder. You don't make the education secretary someone who's really excited about education. You don't make the health secretary someone who used to be a doctor or a nurse or something. You put them in place according to their administrative abilities. So it's, Ed Miliband, he does shine out because he really knows his stuff. Whereas if you think about some other ones who I think have done well, like Steve Reed did well at DEFRA, by and large, certainly on the waterfront. So he's moved to housing now. Well, he ain't a builder, so he's going to have to be learning from the job there. So he's not necessarily going to be able to shine as much as Miliband because he hasn't got 20 years experience in building. Same for some of the others. But I do think there are some other cabinet ministers who have done well. But anyway, the politics stuff is so easy, isn't it, Phil? It's a lot easier than Labour are making it out. I'm not suggesting everything would be fine and dandy if they just had some brains, because they are up against a openly hostile media, mainstream and social media. It's all stacked against them, all of it. This Labour government has the most guns ranged against it of any Labour government that's ever existed. It's just that it's got a leader that is the least politically astute that has ever existed, which is a bit of a shame. But still, it shouldn't be this hard. It's a bit like, right, let's say you had a school football team and they were told they were going to have to play Arsenal's first 11, right? Well, they're not going to win, right? They're not going to win, but that's no excuse for them turning up with cricket bats. Yeah. Just because the odds are ranged against you doesn't excuse amateurish mistakes. Politics, it's not easy, but it is easier than Labour are making it. Workers are better protected in so many ways from next April. That's a good Labour achievement. It is. But the problem here is it not, that they risk, because they're not talking about all the good stuff that's coming, what gets reported in the news, let me just go here, right? We've had nothing about the Workers' Rights Bill. Let's see here. Let's go down the list. So, front page of today's newspaper, Financial Times, Labour dilutes flagship workers' rights. So if you're a member of the public, remember, you don't know these workers' rights are coming. So now you're reading the papers, Labour are watering workers' rights down. Great. Daily Telegraph, Starmer rips up Rayner's rights bill. iPaper, Labour U-turn on workers' rights. Guardian, ministers ditch manifesto pledge for job protection from day one. Times, day one protection of workers abandoned. What's this? We've got the Metro. PM hails big migration for. Irrelevant, that's just for London. Daily Mail are sort of reporting on the migration, but in a bad way. This net migration fall is really bad. It's because it's a brain drain. It's like, yeah, it is. Why did you support it? But anyway, they didn't talk about that. Other papers didn't really bother with it. They've not bothered with it. But, quite a few of those papers, if you're walking past them at the petrol station, the first you know anything about workers' rights, because Labour haven't told you anything, is that Labour are watering them down. How does that look? I mean, it's just politically a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. This manifesto break is politically acceptable as most workers are still benefiting compared to before. Only if they are told that, though. I just think if you're an average person, you don't really know what's going on, you read these papers, you think Labour are watering down workers' rights. Because you don't know what's coming, right? So you're just thinking the default situation now. Oh, are they watering down our rights? How does that look? David there say, I tend not to read the papers or watch KGPN news for the same reason. No, but people do. And the thing about newspapers, you don't have to buy one. They're there. Anyone filling up with petrol, they walk past them. So the headlines jump out at you. Go into the supermarket. They're there at the entrance, right? Newspapers know that there are way more people see their front pages than buy a paper and read it. And they're comfortable with that. But anyway, there it is. We're out of time on that one. Should be on Graham's stream, I assume, later on today. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. Until next time, I'll see you later.